Well, one of the things that we've been talking around is the difference in the UK and the US markets around the CIO role, the Chief Innovation Officer, Chief Information Officer. Sometimes that I can change in different places, but I think it's fascinating to think about that being one of the key differences in the public accounting space is how prevalent the CIO role here is in the US market. Yeah. And so for those who've maybe not seen or understood exactly what that role looks like or how it works, how would you describe the CIO role that you perform or that your peers perform in public accounting, Steve?
Yeah, it's a strategic role. We define it in some simple terms. What I would say is that's work that's below the line or work above the line. And work below the line is typically keeping the lights on, buying the computers, rolling out computers, just keeping things running. It's the run aspect of a CPA firm, but a good CIO can do work above the line, and that means that they need to be exceptional at communications, being able to strategize, think ahead for the firm, interact with peers, sit in on partner meetings and interact with partners at their level, speak their language. You have to be knowledgeable in finance, HR, marketing, the whole breadth of the firm. Got to be able to read financial statements and do budgets and keep track of your budget. And that's not things that typically IT people are good at. But a CIO will be able to step above the line and get in that realm and literally give away, delegate their technical work. You have to be able to delegate your technical work and work yourself out of that job and then become a leader. Another important aspect is being able to develop people. When you're sitting in the server room closet by yourself and tapping on the keyboard, you don't have to develop people. But when you become a CIO or you're doing the CIO's work, you got to be able to develop your team. And that's, going through the review processes and getting to know them and coaching them up. And not a lot of IT people can do that. They can't make that switch to being a CIO, and that's just a natural thing. That's why you see when in our peer groups that all of us are good communicators. We can look you in the eye or shake your hand and work a room or what have you. And in general, IT directors, just depends on their personality, whether they can do that or not, their ambition, things like that. So it's curious to see some that don't make it because they can't step above that line, but others that do, you can see these same qualities in them. They can communicate and talk finance and all the different aspects of the running of the firm.
What's a typical career path for somebody to get to that CIO seat? Are most people coming from an IT background and then becoming more strategic, Steve? Or do you see people who are maybe less IT experienced taking on the role? What does that look like?
I think you make CIO based on really your curiosity and personality rather than education. I'm a strange one in that all my education is in finance. So I got a finance degree and an MBA. I have no IT training whatsoever. I got into it in the early 90s because of the new personal computers that were coming out at the time in the late 80s and the early 90s. And I was just completely fascinated by them. So I had that curiosity of how to build a computer, how to set up Windows and DOS, and if you remember DOS operating system, so I had that drive to learn more about technology, and I had no training whatsoever. So out of college, I got a job as in a very small firm doing IT consulting, basically setting up small point of sale systems and small networks, but also being the IT guy for the firm. So I had a dual role. So I was on call constantly. Almost all of our clients were retail clients. So nights, weekends, I was on call for 14 years, basically. Most CIOs probably come from a computer engineering or software background, things like that, and then grow into their roles because they've got leadership attributes, and their management sees that, so they naturally can move up. But I'm a strange one in that my background's in finance and business. But I love technology every day. Every day is different. That's it's so great about it. It's not monotonous at all. It's challenging every day. And most of my friends will probably tell you the same thing, is that this is not a boring job, if you can imagine.
I know just how much there's going on in the space, but also there's such a blend between the tactical and the strategic, and some of the conversations with CIOs are just fascinating in terms of the way they're trying to navigate so many different aspects. Maybe from a tactical level, how do reporting lines typically work for CIOs? Who are they reporting into? How do they sit in the broader structure of a public accounting CPA firm?
It depends on how the firm views technology and IT, whether it's a strategic enabler of the business or if it's a cost center. And typically, if the leadership of the firm sees it as a strategic enabler of the business, the CIO is going to report to the managing partner or the CEO. That's how it should be, because we should have a seat at the table in all decisions and things that affect the firm, because technology is woven throughout the firm. But there are some firms, unfortunately, where the CIO reports to like the COO or sometimes the CFO, and those come with their own baggage. Like when IT reports to the CFO, those IT departments are typically way underfunded, because that's the CFO's job, is to control the spend. In my career, I've seen that a lot in our peer groups. And that contributes to literally the happiness of the IT staff and their feelings of, am I valuable here? But when the group reports to the CEO, you typically get the funding you need and the wide berth or wide lanes to do what you think is right for the firm. Yeah.
And funding is an interesting topic to delve a little bit deeper on, because the two areas that you talked around like the fundamentals of running the business, and then the more strategic aspect probably plays into some of the way you would fund the CIO team, in the sense of, well, you're going to need to spend to be able to keep the lights on, keep things running. So that's a need cost. But an area like innovation, you can spend as much or as little as you want to in terms of research and development, both in terms of headcount, but technology investment, etc. So how do you think about, as a CIO, deploying resource, if you like, or how to invest in areas like innovation, which some firms would view as a discretionary spend, but I would think that you would recommend that as being something that is a must-have in terms of how much you're investing in innovation.
Yeah, there's a way to do budgeting, and this came from the Boomer Consulting Group, is that you budget in categories of run, grow, and transform. And if you start looking at your budget that way and trying to get as much money in the transform bucket, and maintaining the run and grow, because you need to run the firm and you need to grow when you do M&A. But if you're looking at the money you're putting in transform, you can then report to your leadership, hey, we spent $200,000 this year on stuff that we would call transforming. And those are innovative things. Sometimes when the innovation group is separate from IT, then suddenly nothing you're doing in IT is innovation, because all innovation happens in innovation. But I maintain that the things that CIOs bring to firms, like process improvement, in our firm, I went and got certified and brought process improvement to the firm. That's innovation. Or another attribute of a good CIO is being a noticer of problems, and then owning those and finding solutions for them without needing other prompting from the firm. So a lot of the software solutions we go out and find in the marketplace solve problems for the business that makes the business better. And I would call that innovation. If it's separate from IT, I think the innovation group has to have a budget that they maybe are even required to spend. You can't have people running innovation that don't want to spend any money. That you need to be able to invest, and you need to be able to waste that money and fail fast, and be dynamic in that area. So it's different in every firm. Innovation is thought of differently, so it's all over the map. But I think it's got to be well funded with R&D money or whatever. They've got to be required to spend it, be able to fail fast and try something new. In thinking about putting people in innovation, I've been thinking about this, is that you've got to have people running innovation that are just insanely curious and tinkerers, if you know what I mean, and people that deconstruct things and reconstruct things and understand how they work. And we had a staff at Hogan Taylor that continually pushed the boundaries of what they were supposed to do on their computer, because we ratcheted down the computers to be secure, and he kept installing things like Python so he could do some programming and trying to fix client issues with any tools he could figure out. He would be an amazing innovation leader. Those people that continually push the boundaries of the rules and the regulations, they're the innovators, right? Or like Inflow coming into the U.S. market and pushing the boundaries. That's innovative. I think you got to have that. Be willing to break the rules a little bit and make people uncomfortable. That's a good innovative leader.
That certainly resonates with my career. You know, when I was in public accounting, when I was at PwC, I was probably one of those people that was trying to find where the line was in terms of some of those.
Yeah.
What can I do that means I'm not breaching the policies, but I'm trying to make things better than they were before? And I think that's a mindset sometimes. For me, it was always, well, what's the point in doing it exactly the same as we did it last year? There must be a way that we can improve. Whether that was, I did it last year, I must be better now, 12 months on, than when I did it last year, or somebody else did it last year. Hell, I must be able to come up with something different in terms of the approach. Yeah. And to your point, it's a mindset, it's an attitude. It's not something that you can just send an email and say, hey, you're an innovator now.
Nope.
It's actually around finding those people in the organization.
Yeah, these are innate qualities. You can't teach them. You can't tell somebody to be that. People have it or they don't.
And I think the interesting thing from our experience has been that often people will be naturally looking for quite senior leaders to take on innovation projects or to take on a more hands-on role, sponsoring initiatives, if you like. And what's been interesting has been seeing people find those junior people with those characteristics, taking them off client work and saying, please, can you focus on understanding technology better, implementing technology for us, refining processes. And I think traditionally, people were quite nervous that would possibly be a career limiting move, to move away from client work to work on internal projects. And I think that's been a fault of CPA firms in the past to go, well, hang on a minute, why would I not take my best person off the 10 or 15 or 20 clients that they're working on and get them to work on all of my clients?
Yeah.
Like touch them in every single way possible to try and centralize that nucleus of innovation, if you like.
Yeah.
And those people have accelerated through their careers. And I think that those are the people we need to be highlighting, championing. We've seen them firsthand because those are the people who would lead the Inflow implementation. And all of a sudden they would be also the people that were then leading the next thing that was coming in and the bigger picture stuff. So I think that's maybe something around mindset in firms that we need to think about, is how do we maybe find some of those more junior people who are passionate about this subject? Yes, they'll need some guidance and some leadership over the top of them because of that experience factor, but they've got a much bigger role to play, I think, than we've traditionally given them.
Yeah, and every firm has these people, and you just got to identify them, because there's younger people out there that don't want to do the monotonous, day in and day out. They push the boundaries, and you got to find those people and don't let them get bored, because those are the kids that were really creative as youngsters, and they get bored quickly.
And what happens when they get bored?
I don't know.
They'll leave, right?
That.
They'll leave if they're not being given some means of.
Oh yeah. outlet.
One piece I'm interested in is around, so you talked there about the CIO role, the reporting lines. How does that work interacting with the core business units in a typical public accounting firm? And let's just generalize for the sake of simplicity. You've got audit, you've got tax, you've got advisory. You've got 3 core business units. But the CIO is sitting separately to that, sitting outside of that in the ideal structure you outlined where they're reporting into the CIO or the CEO or the managing partner. So how does the CIO work with those people who are leading the business units that are maybe going to use the technology, or their process is the one that you want to refine? What does the interplay look like and the relationship look like?
Yeah, the IT leaders typically know the business almost better than anybody because HR really focuses on people. The COO focuses on operations, but IT is so interwoven in every department and every person's daily life that we typically know more about the firm than really just about anybody. But it goes back to that, having that quality of being able to communicate, be a people person, walk the halls, listen, keep your ear to the ground, get to know the partners, get to know their problems and issues, what they're hearing in their departments. A lot of firms also embed a business analyst or something in a department and then keep their ear to the ground about what's going on and then bring that back to IT, and then we figure out problems, figure out solutions to problems. For a CIO, it's natural because we're out creating relationships. Most of my job, it was really a relationship job and putting resources together, listening for challenges and things like that. So for me, it's natural to be out and about in the firm and listening for things. So.
And that informs, because you're obviously also looking at the market, looking at new technologies that are coming in,
Absolutely.
Whether that's hearing from them about them through your peer group or at conferences that you're attending or things like that. If you see something that's interesting, seems like it's kind of fitting what some of those pain points are, how do you then interact with those business users that would probably be the people that would be saying, well, does this actually do what I needed to do, that detailed level? Could you talk about how CIOs maybe interact with some of those domain experts in audit or tax or advisory to evaluate a solution or to look at a project that you're trying to drive forward?
Yeah, I typically, my mode of operation typically is if I find a solution that I think would work well in the firm, I go seek out one of those younger partners that's curious or always looking to push the boundaries, and get them on board first, because they'll be the future leaders, they'll be the drivers of these things. And so I look for the younger people that like innovative solutions and improved ways of serving their clients. That's happened just countless times. I typically don't go to the service area leader first. Their big picture, 30,000 foot level. I usually look for a younger partner that is wanting to move things forward and get them on board, and then grow interest from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. So you're almost trying to connect with the people who might be the more passionate, more advocative, and then you can use them as that validation tool. So you're also not then taking to the leader of the service line something that actually doesn't really fit. You've given that initial validation, which I expect would give you more credibility as a CIO, that you're not taking to another leader, multiple things that actually don't really cut the mustard.
Yeah.
But when you are taking something, it's something that, is you feel stronger about.
Yeah. It's been validated
applicability. And you're starting to build that variation. And it's a really interesting way, because one of the things I see, certainly in the UK market, where the CIO role is less prevalent, is innovation becomes a to-do list item on a client-facing partner. And the challenges with that are several.
No. Yeah.
But the most obvious being when those clients start shouting and need servicing, then innovation drops down the to-do list.
Totally.
And so as you talk that through, I think there's a lot for people to learn around having dedicated people focused on innovation. Doesn't necessarily detach it from the business, but I think it alleviates the people in the business who are being rewarded, incentivized, are motivated by delivering great client service.
Right.
To not have to be out there in the market, horizon scanning, to not have to attend every single conference to try and work out what's going on, etc., but not necessarily to feel like they're completely releasing their involvement in innovation. It's almost like you've got, we'd call more that qualification process. You've got somebody in the business that's trying to not just find solutions in the market, but also trying to improve processes within the business to free people up to be great at what they do, because ultimately there's people that are more passionate and more expertise in the area of innovation.
Yeah, the client-facing professionals oftentimes are the origination point of a innovation. They just don't have time to execute it or test it or flesh it out. But they come up with the ideas, and that should always be handed off to the people that have the time and the resources to figure it out and see if that's a real solution. Totally agree with that.
And I as a leader, or my leadership team, I would never expect them to originate an idea and then take it all the way through to implementation. I'd say, there's a clear point where I might have an idea, but I'm not the best person to go and evaluate this, implement this, get into the detailed technical things that are involved with bringing something to life. And that's also not what incentivizes or motivates me. And so how do you try and rethink the distribution of involvement in innovation and make it much more, there's aspects that are being centralized to a team, but there's also then that connectivity with the rest of the business, that they're involved at all stages of that innovation. Yeah.
Having a pipeline for innovation is really valuable. Innovations are happening around the firm, but if you can centralize it and let people do what they do best, that's the best way, certainly. But it happens in all kinds of ways in many firms. It depends on the leadership and what they think about innovation, whether it's even necessary or not. A lot of smaller firms just don't have the time or the money to even think about it. So it's often things die on the vine,
And you've mentioned the firm that you were with for many years, Hogan Taylor, and the experience that you built up there. But I know you've recently made the move to offer that CIO experience and capability to a broader audience through a fractional CIO service or other work that you're doing, Steve.
Yeah.
To a managing partner or a CEO who currently doesn't have a CIO, or maybe has an IT leader who isn't thinking quite as strategically as you're talking about, what do you think are maybe some of the kind of key nuggets that you would share with them as to what they may be missing from not having anyone in that seat, whether it's a full-time or a fractional CIO, and maybe building from that, what are some of maybe the low-hanging fruit or the areas that you feel immediate quick wins for a firm that's probably not thinking about innovation in this way?
Yeah, a lot of growing firms that were smaller and they're growing through M&A or organically, just have not had the person in place to think about IT in a holistic way, understanding everything that's going on in the firm, understanding what's going on in the market, what their peers are doing, what's happening at conferences. You got to have kind of that dynamic role that keeps it all, in the knowledge base and can synthesize it and create a plan for moving the firm forward using technology or process or whatever, innovation. And so many firms don't have that today. And when I was at Hogan Taylor, we grew from 49 people. That's when I first started. And I was the only IT guy. And we grew to 400 plus people and with an IT staff of 13. So I had to learn how to manage people. Gosh, I had to learn quite a bit, especially not having an IT background. I had a finance background. So I learned it and liked it. And all those things I learned, I think, could be well placed in smaller firms that don't necessarily have those skills or experience in IT. I have a personal vendetta in the industry, or personal mission, to get the industry to move away from using email as a client service tool and into secure portals. Really big believer in that. There's several that are out there. My favorite is Liscio, run by Chris Farrell. I think it's going to be a game changer for the industry, and we've got to get away from email. It's a terrible client service tool. It's our biggest risk for cybersecurity, and people, both clients and partners and staff, are buried in email.
Yeah.
And it wastes so much of their time. So I'm on a personal mission to help the firm the industry get away from email, and then I'm also on a personal mission to help smaller firms get compliant with all the regulations that we are under. IRS 4557, Graham-Leach-Bliley, the FTC rules, all around safeguarding client data. And part of that is vendor risk management. Most firms are not doing vendor risk management at all or well. And there are ways to fix that and get compliant so that your clients know that you're taking good care of their data, because data today is an asset, and it's literally a digital asset that we are entrusted with from clients, and most firms are not taking that seriously enough. And once enforcement proceedings happen and the IRS or other bodies make an example out of some firms, there's going to be some panic. So I'm just myself, but I want to help firms get compliant with that stuff too.
I think you make a really good point there. The number of times that we see the conversation about data and ownership and security coming as one of the last steps in the procurement process is somewhat surprising.
Yeah.
Especially given the diverse views of what I'd say the technology vendor community on what they should be doing with data. I think there's some vendors that are being incredibly aggressive over ownership, storage of data, and they're being very lackadaisical in terms of the protection and diligence that's needed around that. So I think that one takeaway for people listening to this would be have those conversations at the very start of the process. Absolutely. Because at the point where you've narrowed your selection process down to one vendor and you've agreed all the pricing, and then you're starting to ask some questions around data ownership, it's too late. You've already, your hearts and minds are on that vendor, and you're going to make a lot of compromises that you potentially should not.
Yeah.
And so front loading that to even just have the conversation in the early stages to go, how are you approaching data? What does this look like? Particularly when you've got client data and your firm's data involved in any platform. A lot of platforms are going to be using both sets of data.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's a really, really tangible takeaway for people to think about that much earlier in the procurement process.
Yeah, that's got to be the first thing you think about is privacy and client data protection before you even start looking at features. I mean, you need to be asking these questions up front. There's an initiative going on in the registered investment advisors industry by a man I met at a conference, and it's called the Digital Asset Initiative, and it's an awareness campaign and a certification campaign to get digital asset fiduciaries, which we're supposed to be acting in our clients' best interest with their data. And this man is starting an initiative to bring awareness and compliance with these regulations that we're under by getting people certified as digital asset fiduciaries, and also vendors like Inflow. And that way clients can see that their CPA or their investment advisor and their vendors have been certified as digital asset fiduciaries. Really interesting and a great time for it. So that's going to be, I think, coming through the CPA side as well, because there's 40-something thousand firms, CPA firms out there, and I guarantee you, very few are doing what they're supposed to be doing to protect client data. So I've got a big mission, personal mission, to help drive that in the industry, and hopefully leave the industry better than I found it, because it's somewhat a dysfunctional industry with data and long hours and things like that. So hoping to contribute something before I retire and ride off into the sunset.
And I think that's where the two of us really connect on that level. We're both trying to move the profession forward and leave it better than we found it.
Yeah.
And I really like what you're trying to do. I think it's exactly what the CPA firm leaders need to be thinking about a lot more.
Right.
It's not getting talked about enough. But that bigger macro, we're trying to do something here that's moving the profession forward.
Yeah.
It really connects with me and what we're trying to do here at Inflow. So I look forward to seeing the impact of what you're doing, Steve, and how you've really started to create a conversation that I hope turns into a bit more of a movement.
I do too. Yeah, it's the industry needs it. We're way behind, and we're way behind other industries in so many things, and there's no reason for it. We have amazingly smart people. We can figure out these problems. And email, we got to get away from email, and we got to secure our clients' data. That's just two big nuggets that need to be fixed.
Yeah.
And I, of course, I'm only one consultant, but whatever I can do to help, I'm trying to do that.
Steve, I've really enjoyed the conversation today.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for taking the time and for sharing your perspectives.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.